So today I'm here with Benji Arhen, who I was very fortunate to connect with at Step Above Stigma's Coffee House Candid Conversations event. And honestly, like when I saw you up on stage talking, I heard something in your story that just really clicked with me. And I was like, I need to go speak to this guy, which is why I came up to you after. And I'm glad we did, because now here we are. And I'm really excited to dive a little bit deeper into your story today. So before we do that, do you want to just take a second to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about who you are?
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Honestly, this has been incredible. I've been looking forward to this. It's been a long time since we planned this, so I'm excited we finally got this going. So my name is Ben or Benji. So I am a recent graduate from Queen's University. Just completed my Master's of Science there. I played football at Queen's University also for about 4.5 years, 4 years. Then COVID hit. Then I made the transition to start coaching. And so I played football there, coached there. And then during that time, I really started having a passion for just mentoring and, just making an impact in a different way. I was really involved in the community there as well. And so it was a great experience. And currently I'm working as a research coordinator for MLSC Foundation in a sport for development facility. So it's been incredible. Life's good right now, just adjusting. And that's a quick.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's funny how you kind of just described like your athletic background, because that's something that we're going to learn more about today
Yeah.
and kind of how that branches off into what's called like your athletic identity.
Mhm.
So you explained a little bit about your Queen's career. Can you give us a background of what your like athletic journey looked like growing up?
Yeah, of course. So it's actually pretty interesting. So for me, I was born and raised in Ghana, West Africa. So moved here, first generation immigrant in 2009. So not long ago, with my brothers. I'm one of five boys, and moved into a pretty rough neighborhood. But went through a lot of adversity that kind of brought me where I am today. And going through, I actually didn't really get into sports until maybe like grade 9 or 10. I had a crazy growth spurt from like grade 10. I grew like 4 or 5 inches. Started doing track, so I ran track all throughout high school. That was what my main sport was, and I was involved in a bunch of other things. And actually was like the athlete of the year when I was in high school. So started really getting into my own. So I guess that's the identity, the athletic identity, kind of started there because that was what that was the recognition that I was getting. But also always knew that there were other things that I wanted to kind of get into. And so yeah, so started playing, started doing track, played other sports like basketball, soccer, and it wasn't actually till like my last year of high school, grade 12, where I was a pretty fast kid, pretty athletic kid, and I was like, is there something else that I could do with my speed, with my athleticism? Like, I wasn't really exposed to football much. My older brother was a football player, a little bit rugby player, so I was kind of like, okay, let's see what this has going there for me. My high school didn't have a football team too, so that was like pretty hard. And so I think there was one December 2015, a good friend of mine who was playing football at the time. Shout out Devon. One of my closest friends, he was just like, "Hey, why don't you go try out for like the Team Ontario team? Like, why not? You don't have a football team. You want to kind of get a little bit of exposure out there." So I was like, "Okay, maybe." But obviously, Team Ontario, like we were supposed to go play for Team USA in Texas in like the next couple of months. I had no experience whatsoever, and so I kind of took that opportunity and just went out there, tried out, had like the old equipment, wasn't as fancy as anyone else, just came in my little soccer cleats. And surprisingly, I that's where the coaches at Queens were. They saw something really special in me. And, ended up making the Team Ontario squad, traveled to Texas to play on Team US, which was the crazy experience, and then got recruited by Queen's University during that process. So yeah, it was like a year of football in, started really diving in there. And so it was like a learning experience for me as I was going through. So playing football for a year and a half and then getting a scholarship to a university like Queen's was insane for me the next year. So there was a lot of learning during the process. But yeah, it was it was great. It was like so much happened so quickly
Hmm.
that I didn't expect. So yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, good for you. First of all, that's incredible. But what was that like? Like that happened so quickly where you weren't really an athlete and then you started running track and then football came to you so fast and then you went boom, 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 Team Ontario, Queen's University scholarship. Like, what was that like for you mentally?
It was a lot. Like it was a lot, but as like a high school student at that point, I would say that was when I was like, oh, Benji, the football player. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
so many good things happened to me that were associated with sport. So mentally, it was just like, okay, trying to figure out this transition. I also didn't even know about Queen's University until they came to that tryout. So I had already submitted my applications for universities. Queen's University wasn't even on that list, and so there was just so much going on. I had to go to my visit at Queen's and like see what the lifestyle. It was just like it was a lot, but I think it really started creating like almost like an ego in me, like a pride, um, heavy sense of pride because I was like, oh, like I could do this. And it was also great for my family because I don't know if you know much about like just like immigrant traditional families. It's all like go to school, get your degree, go get a job. Like we didn't really growing up, we didn't really. I was the first one out of all my siblings to kind of just be like, hey, let's like break the norm a little bit and see how else I can create opportunities for myself using something completely unconventional like football, right? And so yeah, that process was just like it was like the craziest couple of months of my life. In the span of 8 months, I had started playing on Team Ontario, gotten a scholarship, visited Queen's University. All this attention was coming on now, and it was just as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old boy, it was I don't know. It was a lot to process.
It's a lot of pressure for sure that
Yeah,
we just generally put on high school students to go to the next level.
100%.
And you brought up some really great points, of course, about being a first generation immigrant. There's definitely other barriers there to consider that most people don't even have to think about when going through this process. And you mentioned like the ego part and Benji, the football player,
Mhm.
which I think is like exactly what athletic identity is and what it's tied to. So since your journey was a little bit different, I want to know like how you define athletic identity and how it's impacted you both positively and negatively if you have any examples.
Yeah. So, man, like, and obviously we'll get into you a bit because I know you went through this too. You were D1. You were in it. So, I guess for anyone who might listen to this that has played sports and that kind of has an idea of just what that feeling is like, especially for a sport like football. Just like a debrief of like what it was like. I went directly into training camp in August 2016. At that time, school hadn't started, right? So we get to Queens, directly to training camp, two a day practices, um, learn the playbook, get on the field, boom, 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 boom. Our whole lives became football. During the season, you have about, there was one year where we had about 43, 44 hours of football a week, including game time, traveling, and so every like and football, there's 100 and what 10, 120 guys on the roster, 40 people travel. Everything you do is the sport. Everything you do is football. You wake up, we have workouts at 5:50 a.m. Go to class, come back. 3 p.m. we have film that's starting. Then 5:30 p.m. we have practice, and then do it all over again. And there was also perks, right? Like being at university, you're known as, football guy. Like if you do well on game day, there's videos showing at like the athletic center. You get recognition by professors, students, and so the ability to fail or succeed almost becomes directly tied into failure and success on the field. So when I think about athletic identity, I think everything in your life becomes completely tied to the athletics, the sport that you're in, even when there's no direct correlation or relationship there. So, like, if I do well on the field, for example, like I remember having a conversation with a friend, and we're talking about, you get benched a game, and then you start thinking, man, do I even like, am I even attractive? Just some completely unrelated things about everything. It just, you become so sucked into that, and then you start to feel like that's the only thing that defines you. When you are doing well, you feel good. When you're doing bad, you feel bad. Everything that you are becomes the sport, and that is, it's good in the sense of discipline, when you understand how you can translate that outside of it. But when that becomes the only thing, it's dangerous. Like it's serious, because, as you know, it could be taken away from you like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
what happens? Right? Um and so that for me, that's kind of like a large description of like, athletic identity is literally relating every single aspect of your life to the success and the failure of your athletic performance on the field. Everything.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
like that definition. And I feel like the term athletic identity is still pretty new. Like it's something
mhm,
that we've been talking about the last few years, but we don't really still understand the effects of how it's tied, like you said, to everything in your life, your mental
mhm,
health, your emotional stability, your own perception of like self-worth and self-esteem. It really does branch out into so many different aspects of your life. And it's really fascinating because like athletes are so connected to their sports and
mhm.
their accomplishments and everything, and just the way that they like carry themselves in the world is so, I'm an athlete, like that's just their
Yeah.
whole persona.
Nice.
So to consider like them as a human is so like outwardly to them, but it's, I don't know, I think that whole quote that's like you have to put the person before the athlete
Oh
is
yeah.
so true, but it's so hard to actually teach kids that.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And like, I kind of wanted to flip that like question like on you. I know you went through your experience with like with athletics. Like, what, how did you embody that identity, and how did that show up for you?
Oh man. It was tough because growing up, like my whole life, I was
Yeah.
Angelica, the soccer player. Like that's what I was. Like I would introduce myself and just be like, "Oh, I play soccer." That was my
Yeah.
whole identity. It was everything that I was in the world. And the way I saw it is kind of just like how much you connect your life to your sport. And to me, it was everything. But then, of course, that started to change when I went through my injuries and stuff. I kind of had to look at it from different perspectives. So that shifted a little bit, which brings me, going to flip that back to you. You
Mhm.
also went through some injuries as well, right?
Yes. Yes.
So did your definition change when you went through that?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough where we obviously know the concussion issues when it comes to football, and things can literally flip like that. So I didn't have any serious injuries, but I had some season-ending injuries. Like, my last ever game as a Queens football player ended off in an injury because I thought I was going to come play in COVID, and that changed, right? And so for me, every time I would get injured, or have injuries that would prevent me from participating on the field, it made me feel so worthless, right? Because I don't know with soccer, but like, let's say like with football, you have film every single day. When you're injured and you are one of the star players, and you're used to getting all the attention from the coaches, and during film, like, Ben, why is this play good? Ben, why is this okay? Ben, tell me what you did here. And then you go into film session where now you're not really participating anymore, so you're just kind of there, or in practice where you're not the focal point anymore, or just feeling like, having the pressure of coaches, being like, okay, so like, how's the injury? Like, how are you getting better? Or are you getting better? Like, how, like, what do you do? And you just literally feeling like, obviously there's this quote that I kind of try to go by in terms of, it's called like the serenity prayer, where it's like a prayer where it's like, Father, give me, what is it, um it goes, allow me to accept the things I can't control, give me the courage to control the things that I can, and the knowledge to know the difference. And that's something that I live my life by, because being an athlete, I try to control so much. And an injury is something that is completely out of your control. And unfortunately, I also didn't have the emotional regulation and the emotional awareness. And I guess my prefrontal cortex wasn't developed enough to understand that that like how I reacted to that situation didn't define who I was. I mean, how I reacted to that this situation or what that situation was didn't define who I was. So it really, really just like took a toll on me every time I would get injured because I was just like, oh, and you almost sometimes ask yourself, like, am I really injured? Like, maybe I could push it. Maybe, and then when you're in class, like now you have, like, especially being a student athlete, there's so much other things that you still have to focus on to play the sport. And it just impacts everything else. If you tore your ACL, you can't go to class now. You know what I mean? If you got a concussion, they literally force you to like stay in a dark room, no light, no everything is impacted, and now other things are being taken. So, injuries really, really, I would say every time I got injured was like the lowest I would be in my mental state in that moment. Just cause like you just feel like you're not needed,
Hmm.
you
It's
know,
such a change to your regular routine. Absolutely. Like
you're
it's
replaceable. Like,
fair. Yeah.
mhm.
It's tough to like make that mental switch knowing that, your team is still moving forward doing all the things and you just kind of have to take a back seat. You're focusing on your recovery, you're doing XYZ and you're
Oh,
not really involved in what you used to be. So
mhm.
it's so tough. Injuries literally suck.
Ah, how did you deal with your injuries? Because you had like what you tore your ACL.
I had 5 knee surgeries, so I had 2 ACLs, 3 meniscus. Yeah, not
Oh my
fun.
god! On the same knee or on both knees?
On both. I've had 2 on one, 3 on the other.
Oh,
So yeah, I think at the beginning I kind of went the opposite. So like my first two, especially, I used like my athletic mentality to try to get me through. So I
mhm.
pushed so hard in rehab. I was like working every day. Like I made recovery my life. I was like doing all my exercises. I'm like, I'm going to be back in 6 months. Let's go, like on to the next. And I use that as like my motivation and passion to really get back on the field. But then towards the end, I think it really started taking a toll on me. Like the last few, I think I was just forced to like, again, look at myself as more than an athlete and see like what else can I do as a person. And that's really when I started getting involved like in my community and doing mental health
Mm,
advocacy and stuff. And I think as tough as it was, like I definitely still hold a little bit of anger and resentment towards what happened. I don't
mm,
think I deserved everything that happened. But again, like you said with that serenity prayer, like really trying to focus on the things that are in my control and letting go of what I can't. Because I cannot control what happened. It's
oh,
done. Trying to move on and kind of just like balance different perspectives to put me in the best headspace, which is
oh.
difficult sometimes.
100%. But isn't it so crazy? And I think this is what goes into, we'll get into that after, but what goes into like, what other situation are you ever put in where, like, as an athlete, where you go through multiple, like, like injuries, you know what I mean? Or multiple setbacks, like serious setbacks where you literally have to, like, train your mind to understand, okay, day by day, day by day, day by day. Like, and I always say, like, sports, physical activity, like working out, sports, or just being an athlete is like the most perfect metaphor or analogy to like life, and to the hardships of life and the unpredictability of life, to just, I don't know, it just it's tough. It's tough. Because imagine in what, if you're in what world are you literally hearing something in your knee and being like, okay, let's get back to it. And then that happening again and being like, oh, okay, let's get back to it. You know what I mean? Like, so I can only imagine like the
Hmm.
5 times. Oh my God, that's like beaten down, beaten down, beaten down, beaten down. So and that's where it can be really, really dangerous for a lot of athletes' mental health, because if your self-worth is directly tied to your capabilities on the field or your ability to even perform, if you can't do that, then who are you?
Hmm. Yeah.
Right?
And I love what you said about like sports just being like a replica of life because it is so true. It's dealing with the ups and downs, it's facing
Mhm.
adversity. Like I always say, sport taught me everything I know about like teamwork, leadership, adversity, everything. Like sport has taught me so much and has given me everything that I have today.
Mhm.
And it's true. Like, I mean, we're talking about injuries, like it happening and the mentality behind it, but that can happen with like, I don't know, starting a business and it failing. And
Mhm.
you have to be like, okay, on to the next, what's next?
Yeah,
So many different things you can make that applicable to.
exactly.
Um, which brings me to like, you mentioned this with the first time we chatted and kind of using like sport as a tool. So I
Mhm.
want to know how you define that and
Mm.
I don't just like how you actually use that in your life.
Yeah. So I love every time I do my when I do my speaking engagements or when I'm mentoring or talking to youth in that space, always love talking about utilizing sport as a tool and not being a tool of sport. One of my closest friends, Chris Osikusi, so I talked a little bit about this at the event in the organization that he created, Switch Mentality. And so just like he's a lawyer and playing in the CFL right now, a professional football player. Incredible human being. And we have a lot of these conversations about how sport can be one of the most powerful things when realized, but can also be one of the most detrimental things for you. So when we talk about using sport as a tool, like we talked about sport being a perfect metaphor for life, I think as you grow older, especially in university, like first year, second year, I think about just what I like. Everything that I learned in sport was related to sport, right? I didn't think about the translatability of what everything that I was going through was gonna help me do in the real life. So when I was, one of my coaches, the current coach of the Queen's University team right now, amazing coach, took the team to back-to-back championships after going season 3 and 5 every season before that, and he has these frameworks for the players, and one of them is called like ABCs. So always show up, be on time, communicate if you can't do A or B. And when I was in university and I was like younger, when I'd see those things, I just thought it was just football. Like show up for meetings, show up for practice. When I came into the real life and I started working and I started meeting people and started talking about, just honoring my commitments and started talking about just like, working on self mastery and being the best person I possibly can in everything that I do, I started thinking about, so this is what they were trying to communicate to us. So this is what, when I would do, like, I would mess up on the field and have my coach criticize me in meetings, being in real life when, you're doing a project for your company and, you didn't do something right. And it's the criticism in football is extremely tough. Obviously, then it's not like that. But being able to just understand like everything that sport teaches you is so applicable to other things outside of life. So sport is I would say one of the most powerful tools to help, especially youth that are going to actualize and realize their potentials. Using sport as a tool to actualize your self-esteem. You know what I mean? To build confidence, to build resilience, to learn how to work in a team, to learn how to build grit, to learn how to, build mental toughness. Sport provides you the opportunities to learn these things. And the amazing thing about sport, it's like the spinach and the spinach and the smoothie analogy. Like sport, when you're a kid, you grow up loving sport. Like kids want to play sport. They want to play sport. So it's powerful because you can put the spinach of the life skills and all the amazing things that you can learn into the smoothie of sport and having fun, right? And so I think that's what I mean when I say using sport as a tool, because the older you get and the more experiences you go through sport, you start to realize, like, rather than just being beat down by this and literally being limited to only this being a tool of sport being utilized by the sport, why don't you start to think about it and like, okay, like, we lost the game today. How can I use this? How can I use this like bounce back, this mentality that I have, like, let's go next? How can I use that in real life? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a pretty in-depth explanation about that, but that's kind of how I see it. Does that make sense?
Hmm. No, I love that. And I've never heard the spinach and smoothie analogy, so I like that. I'm gonna use
Mm.
that one.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Um, but I love your explanation. I think it is so true, everything you said to a T. It's using what I just said before, like sport as a way to teach you like how to be a person,
yeah.
not
Mhm.
just an athlete. And like I said again, there's so many skills and lessons and things that I have taken away from being an athlete that I really do apply to my everyday life, which is something I'm so grateful for. And I always have to like look back and, thank my parents for even putting me in sports and for teaching me those things. Like without those opportunities, I wouldn't be in the position that I am today. I obviously wouldn't have experienced the same setbacks and things, but I really think that's what like taught me how to be resilient and overcome tough
Mm,
things. And that absolutely can be applied to my everyday life. When something difficult happens, I can look back and be like, hey, I got over X. I can absolutely do this. How did I get over that? Let me do that again.
yeah.
And it really is just like a process of teaching yourself how to use this in a new environment or
Oh,
situation.
100%. And for you, like I can imagine you being, just from hearing your story, being probably one of the most resilient individuals that I could possibly talk to, going through five knee and like not just injuries but surgeries. Like I was grateful enough that I never had any major surgeries. Like one of the craziest injuries that I had was that I partially tore my groin, which was hell. I had to get like cortisone shots. Going through so many surgeries and like bouncing back, being who you are now, seeing the success that you continue to acquire. That's like the perfect. It's almost like you. It's evident. You see the results of doing the work, and I think it's like extremely important that, especially when people are that play sports, just understanding like, okay, what is the worst thing that ever happened to me? Because for a youth, it's really hard to have these conversations with them about, how do you build confidence? How do you, so utilizing sport is like the perfect metaphor, the perfect analogy. And we'll get into what I do at my job, but that's like that's what this is built for. Like you can say, okay, I'm going through such a tough time right now. Relate. So that's primary relatability. I tore my ACL and had meniscus injuries 5 times. Okay, I am where I am right now. Back. How did I do that? And going through the motions of, even though the waking up every day to go to therapy, physical therapy and like working out, even though that's like the outcome is different, the things that you did with it's the same brain processes. It's
Hmm.
okay. I'm having a hard time at work, or I'm not reaching. I know I want to build this business, and it's not working the way it's supposed to. Going back and be like, okay, what do I need to do every single day to be there? I got to do everything that the person that I want to become has to do. I want to get out of this injury. So what does the person that's not injured do? They go to the gym every day. They do the rehab. They do the work. They get mentally strong. What does a person that wants to build a business do? They wake up every morning. They honor their commitments. They stay mentally and physically sharp. They get good mentors. Like just like the like literally picking out thing. It's so dope, man. And I get really passionate when I talk about it because the minute it like hit me or it clicked for me, I was like my life changed. The way that I looked at things, the way that I dealt with my mental health, the way that I dealt with my relationships, the way that I dealt with my family, my life, opportunities, jobs changed because I just started thinking, okay, I have the answers to how I got through things. Even though it was relatable to sport, this is what I need to do. Step by step, day by day. So yeah.
Hmm. Was there a specific light bulb moment for you that's like notable?
um I think that's so. I think the last couple of years has been, I would say, like a series of light bulb moments. I think last year, I went through an experience where a close friend of mine passed away, minutes before I was with him, and that really just like mentally, I think that was the first time where I would start feeling the same things in terms of anxiety. So for me, obviously, we know this whole toxic masculinity thing. Being a black football player who was born and raised in a tradition that mental health is literally a freaking myth in, when I would getting anxious before football games, or I wasn't, my coach benched me for one game, so I couldn't sleep, or the heart rate and all these things that I was feeling. And then when, a friend passes away, or, going through my master's, having a deadline of like, you need to defend your thesis by this date. What do you got to do? You start feel like the same physiological feelings. It's the same physiological feelings. It's the same neurotransmitters being released. It's the same, like the increase in heart rate, the anxious thoughts, all of these. And so I think my light bulb moment would have been probably when I decided to start going to therapy last year and talking through it, and starting to make those relationships, and then kind of thinking about where I was in that moment compared to where I was then. But yeah, I think it's a continuous learning process for me. Continuous learning process for me. But I would say like the like this year has been absolutely transformational for me, in terms of actually like actualizing that light bulb moment. Like that light bulb
Mhm.
moment is the self awareness, right? But self awareness without action is just idiocracy. Like you can be as aware as possible, but if you're not doing anything about it, the anxiety is even going to be even worse. So I think
Mhm.
this year, with just like finishing, coming back into the real world, traveling. I did a little backpacking trip around Southeast Asia in the beginning of the year, doing all these hard things that I would never think that I could do, and then relating that back to like the hard things that I did when I was just playing football. Things started to really click, and I'm still
Mhm.
working on it. I'm not perfect. I'm still every single day trying to like figure out, okay, what are the areas that I can improve in, So that's what you have to
Mhm.
do when you're playing sports, right?
Yep, it's a journey. Well, first of all, I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm sorry
No,
that you went through that. But I'm also very proud of you for going to therapy, which just made me want to ask, how was that like in your family? Because I know traditionally, probably, like you said, mental health is a myth.
Mhm.
Was that like a battle trying to explain to them that you're going to therapy, or was it kind of just understood?
I don't even think I bothered trying to explain it to them. I don't think. I think I'm one of five boys, and I'm so lucky to have four amazing men in my life that understand that, like, me and my brothers have very, very, like, conversations that black men shouldn't be having, or that seems like black men. Let me pardon that. That seems like it's like a taboo thing for a man to tell, not just black men, for a man to tell another man, like, I love you. You're gonna get through this. Like, it's okay to tell me that you're struggling. You know what I mean? So in terms of talking to my brothers about it, although they understood, it was still, everyone has their different ways of dealing with it. My parents are very religious, so it was like, you're feeling anxious, pray to God about it, or like, which, like, it works for some people, but like I like to understand the deeper meaning
Mhm.
behind like why I'm feeling the way that I'm doing, and spirituality is a great supplement when you understand,
Mhm.
what the aim is. So I don't think I really bothered explaining it to my parents, but my siblings were incredible in understanding that that was helping me, and like being supportive about it.
Yeah, I was just curious. It's always interesting to hear different people's perceptions of like therapy and mental health and
Mhm.
stuff. So thanks for sharing that. Um, Transitioning back a little bit. So you mentioned that you're still involved in sport with like coaching and mentoring and stuff. So why did you decide to stay involved with youth mentoring, and really like what's your goal with helping young people?
Yeah, this is my life. The story of my life is that I guess there's something that I always talk about, being the change that I want to see. And everything that I do, I think about who I was as a 16, 17-year-old boy, first year university, and the who I am now. Who are the people, or what would the mentors that I would have wanted at that point have been doing for me? Right. And so I tried to be that person for my like younger me. And so the reason why I'm still so very involved is because I am a living testimony. Like, I'm a researcher. I want results. I want to see data. I want to see, evidence. I am evidence. I am evidence of what, adversity can produce. evidence of what utilizing sport as a tool can produce. And I'm not saying that I've accomplished everything. Like I have still so much more, so much further to go. But I think just being able to be an example, just being able to just like, and for me, my whole thing, I feel that my whole purpose is just inspiring others with my positive energy. I've been blessed enough with amazing education, but also an ability to connect with people, ability to translate knowledge, and ability to communicate with people, which is a factor of my family, my education, my surroundings, and so just being able to especially with marginalized youth, be an example of someone who did the football thing and then coached while doing a master's in science and biochemistry, and then doing things in the community, advocating for youth, being an example for Black youth. You know what I mean? Someone that looks like me objectively to society shouldn't be doing these things. Shouldn't. And here's the thing: information, the norm is the norm. If enough people believe that something is what it's supposed to be, that's what they're going to believe, right? And so the more exposure, the more I'm able to connect with more people and connect with youth, especially starting young and understanding, yeah, like freaking crush it in your sport, but don't just focus on the physical part. Focus on, okay, mentally, what is every single thing that you're doing right now? Like what is that teaching you? Knowing your why. I think that's the biggest thing. I always talk about know your why. Like, why did this happen? Okay, why did this happen? And then how can I use this in other places in life? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I stay involved and I continue to, I have this like, and I think it's my calling. I think I have this deep passion and this deep like love of like mentoring youth, not just with like sports, but with everything else, with academics, with just life, just like being an example of for them,
Mm-hmm.
communicating with them the way that they would normally be able to communicating, and just being present, to just show them that like this is possible, and you can continue to build a life you want as long as you change the way you look at things. So short answer, just want to be an example.
I love that. And I think you are a walking example of overcoming adversity, knocking down barriers, and really just coming into the person that you want to be, which is awesome. And you mentioned that, like, you just want to be like positive energy, and you definitely feel
Mm,
that in just the way that you speak. So thank you for shining so much light in this world.
thank you so much.
Um, and I want to learn a little bit more about the research side of things. So is that what you're doing right now in your role?
Yes, yes. So it's actually funny. So I did my master's in exercise physiology and muscle biochemistry, and my research right now. So after my master's, I something I also did. I really, really tried to advocate for Black people in science when I was doing my master's because it was something that I didn't see often. But I also wanted to be, I wanted to get more involved in like research that was immediately impactful. So like you could see a lot of the research that I did, like my thesis was based off of these like most minuscule proteins, which it's great for some university class down the line on some diagram. But how can I use the research to to tell my story and to kind of help individuals in that way. So so my research right now at MLSC Launchpad. So MLSC, Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, they are like the primary entertainment company, overseer for the Raptors, the Maple Leafs, Toronto FC, the Toronto Argonauts. So it's a massive company, and they have like their foundation, which essentially does a lot of the community engagement stuff, does a lot of sport for development, different things. And so my role is a research coordinator at one of their foundations, which is like Launchpad. And what we do is we try to find ways to utilize sport to help youth develop their potential, right? And so we like look at these. So we have like these pillars, like ready for work, ready for school. Um, what is it? Ready for work, ready for school, a healthy body, healthy mind, and we everything that we do is like surrounded in that pillar. So my role is just kind of like I'm a research coordinator and evaluation for the whole facility for foundation, and I just use my experience with data and analysis and my curious mind and asking questions, and we ask important questions. We evaluate what we're finding. We look into our programs, like what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong, what are we seeing here, how can we use So, like for example, you have a program called Sport and STEM. So you using sport to help individuals learn concepts in science, right? Again, disguised in the broccoli the spinach in the smoothie. So then when that's done, let's take that data. Let's do a bunch of surveys. Let's collect a bunch of information. Let's put some Fitbits on them. Watch how they're moving around, and figure out if there's correlations, there's relationships there, and then present that data, go to conferences and whatnot. But yeah, it's amazing to see that the sport for development industry is growing. And a lot of people are just understanding that, especially for youth, like our focus is on youth. Youth is always number one. Helping them understand and develop these skills through sport and providing opportunities while doing that. You know what I mean?
How did you land such a perfect role? That sounds like
Yo,
it's like designed for you.
it's crazy. So the day that I spoke at the Step Above Stigma, so I didn't even have the job at that time. I was still in the process, but I don't know. I don't know where it came from, and I think I've really started to dig deep into my spirituality and the universe, and I think once I started doing all the right things in terms of just becoming the best version of myself and understanding, not just understanding my purpose, but living in purpose, which I said, utilize my positive energy to just inspire others, translate knowledge, and just be an example. Someone messaged me on LinkedIn with this position, and I was like, "Wait, what is this?" And it was just so crazy. A friend of mine was the person that was in the position before that, and so there were just so many connections in that. Anyways, so I think it's really important once you start understanding your potential, understanding your purpose or what you're meant to do. It's a law of attraction. Good things just happen, and so I don't know how I found this perfect role.
Divine
Also,
timing, for real.
mind timing. Also, if you haven't noticed, I like to talk a lot, so just shut me up whenever I'm done.
No, you're good. I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
And I kind of just always like to end with like a little piece of advice or a message that you would give to, so in this case, the young athletes out there, the next generation. If you could leave them with one specific message or piece of advice, what would it be?
Whew, how does a person that talks so much break everything down? I think the piece of advice that I would give is adversity builds character. Adversity builds character, and understand that everything that you are going through, whether that is in sports, whether that is in life, whether that is in no matter what you do, there is a reason for that, right? Everything is meant to be. We just don't know that it's meant to be, right? And so I think the advice that I would give is adversity builds character, and continue to understand that everything that you're going through with sport, with life, it's meant to teach you something. Lessons, not losses. So yeah. Let me summarize that there before I start going on another tangent, because there's a lot of things that yeah.
Yeah, I keep that question broad for a reason, but I love that you went that direction because it's something that I live by as well. Um, I am a firm believer in like everything happens for a reason. I know some people absolutely hate that statement,
Yeah.
um, but I like to pair it with like everything happens for a reason, but you're like allowed to be upset with the outcome. Like,
100%.
sure, my injury sucked. Did it happen for a reason? Now I think yes. In the moment, I was pissed. I
Mm,
was not thinking like, oh, everything happens for a reason. I was not in that headspace. It's kind of one of those things that like down the line, once you got through the thing, you learn the things that you needed to learn. You can look
mm,
back and be like, oh, that had to happen for some reason. Although it
100%.
sucked, here I am today.
And you know what? 100%. I think, like you said, a lot of people hate. Hindsight is always 2020, right? And I think, you know, this mentorship journey for me, and being like a voice, and just being there for youth and for other people, is a new experience for me, and something that I always realize is sometimes it's not the it's when people are going through things, you almost have to just understand that that might not be the best. That might not be the advice that they want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
right? The adversity builds character thing is it's all great, but yeah, if I had torn my ACL and meniscus 5 times, I would have been like, "What the? What do you? what do you mean this happened for a reason? Am I a bad person? Like what?
Yep.
So yeah, no, it's definitely. I think it's also just learning how to, have that support there and like be there for people like that, and translate that without, I don't know. It's very easy to just be like, it's gonna get better. It's gonna get better, but yeah, still trying to learn how to translate that information when someone's going through the pain in the moment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's a journey. Life's a journey. It's all about kind of finding balance through all the ups and downs. Another one of my mantras is just like finding peace in the madness, really
Yeah.
trying to focus again on what you can control. There's always going to be all these
Mhm.
things happening around you, but it's kind of our job in this life to just figure out what we can do, make the best out of whatever hand we've been dealt, and go forth.
Mhm. Big time, 100%, 100%. So I don't know if you have any more time left, but for you, how has your life looked with everything that you've been through, where you were then, where you are now?
That's a broad question.
It is.
I have definitely like again, like in this moment now, I do think everything did happen the way it was supposed to. I am still quite angry about how things happened. I think I lost a lot of opportunities that I could have had in sports specifically. But then again, it did put me in this chair right now talking to you, having a podcast,
Mhm.
being a public speaker, doing a TEDx talk. Like
Oh,
none of that really would have been possible without the things that I went through. And I think like I did genuinely learn something from each shitty experience I went through. So that's something I'm grateful for. And yeah, like my story is pretty unique. Nobody goes through 5 knee surgeries in 5 years, which makes me stand out a little
oh
bit.
my
But
God. How are your knees right now? Like, are you fully
actually,
back?
fine. I still play, which is
Oh,
another
what?
thing. Yeah, like I'm so thankful I can still play. Because people warned me like I wouldn't be able to walk in a few years. Um, but yeah, I'm just happy that I again still can like be involved in sport, not to the same extent that I once was, but I still do have that passion for it and
Yeah.
let those lessons like lead me in my day-to-day life, which is something I'm really proud I'm like
Mhm.
aware enough to realize because of everything that I went through.
How did your family feel? Like, because parents, I can only imagine if my kid was going through five. Like, how was that support system for you, and how did they like deal with it?
Yeah, it was hard for everyone because growing up, like I was such a dedicated soccer player. Like in all my free time, I was out like kicking the ball around, practicing keep ups. Like I was a very, very motivated kid. Um, and they knew I had high aspirations. Like I wanted to go to the States. I wanted to go to the next level. I was on the provincial team. Like that was literally my whole life. So to go through those things, it really took a hit on everyone. They pushed us growing up. Like my dad was a big soccer player. He really just wanted the best for us. So for them to see me going through these really shitty things and them not being able to do much was hard. But they were great through everything. Like they obviously had to drive me to all my appointments. They had to support
Mhm.
me when the days were a little bit tougher.
Mhm.
So I truly could not have gotten through anything without my friends and
Mhm.
family.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
That is amazing. Hey, if you're maybe I'll try to get some TFC tickets for you or something for this amazing podcast.
I would love that. But yeah, I'm a big Toronto sports fan. So
Oh, are you? Okay,
yeah,
awesome. Well,
jealous that you work there.
I remember that. You know what? I remember that. We'd be getting discounts for sports. I've never seen a hockey game in my life, and apparently the Maple Leafs are pretty popular. So maybe I should go to one.
Leafs tickets are so freaking expensive.
Yeah, I heard. I was like, what? Are they a good team in the league? Like, are they one of the best? I should probably know this. I'll go.
Uh, do you know anything about being a Toronto Leafs fan?
I heard it's
The
very frustrating.
disappointment, the heartbreak,
Are you
it's
a Leafs
been
fan?
years.
Are
Yeah.
you a Leafs fan? Okay, okay, okay. That's so funny. Oh my god.
They're good until it matters, and then
Yeah.
the playoffs happen, and
Yikes. Same old, same old, same old. Eh?
every year. But
Um,
it's fine. We live and we learn.
facts. That's the mantra.
Awesome. Well, this has been Fabulous. And I loved learning so much from you today. And honestly, I know there's so much more to your story. We just covered like
Mhm.
athletics, but you have so many other life experiences that maybe we can get into on another podcast
Yeah,
episode down
yeah.
the line. But it's been so great connecting with you and learning more about who you are and what you
Mhm.
do. So thank you so much just for everything that you're doing in this space.
Thank you so much. I would love to continue to connect. And, honestly, this has been amazing. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Every opportunity that I have to share my story and, reach a wider audience. And, it's awesome. So thank you for reaching out, and you're killing it. You are freaking killing it.
Right
Never
back
forget.
at you.
Awesome. All right.